and the punishment is death. Hi friends, my name's Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and today I'm starting my November wrap-up. It is November 2nd, and I do a vlog-style wrap-up every month to tell you what books I'm finishing throughout the month. I finished some books, so I need to tell you about them. Like I said, it is the 2nd of November, and this month is the Get a Clue Readathon, so I have to keep it under wraps what I'm reading these books for until the readathon is over. Thankfully, when this video comes out, the readathon will be over. So in here, I will be actually able to say what I'm reading them for, what prompts I'm reading them for, and that's exciting because at this moment in time, I'm having to be very hush-hush. Let me show you what I've read already for the month of November. It's only the 2nd day, but I've already finished 2 books. The first book I finished was my room prompt. We actually ended up in the dining room for the first round of Get a Clue. And the prompt was to read a book published in the same month that you were born. This one is published in the same month that I was born. This was on Timmy's TBR, so this was perfect. I got a Timmy's TBR book into Clue, so yay me.
Maybe it might never happen again.
This is the 3rd book in the Ravenspire series. This is a retelling series of fairy tales or classic stories. This one is a Prince and the Pauper retelling. You could read these out of order, but there are moments where some of our previous characters from the other books do make cameos in the subsequent books. It's only for little snippets of time, so you still could read these as standalones, but I would recommend reading the whole series. It's quite fun. The first book is a Snow White retelling. The second book is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and like I said, this is Prince and the Pauper. This follows Javon. Javon is a prince, and he has been away at school for the last 10 years. He's returning home, but his uncle has formed a coup against his father and has taken his bastard son and placed him in as the prince. He tries to kill Javon and puts his son in as a replacement. Javon does survive, but ends up in prison, and eventually has to show everyone he is the real rightful prince. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It's probably my 2nd favorite in the series. I still think the Snow White one is my favorite, but this is a close second. I did have a fun time with this, and all the battles that Javon has to do, like, because there's like a trial by battle in the prison, that was kind of fun and interesting to watch. The second book I read was In the Hall with the Knife by Deanna Peterfriend. This is a Clue mystery series. It's a YA trilogy that follows our favorite Clue characters as they solve a murder. Obviously, I picked this up for Get a Clue. I was going to do this as a video series, reading the whole series. However, I realized really quickly that it was going to be hard for me to vlog the subsequent books while not telling you who was killed and who were the murderers. It was going to be very hard not to spoil it. So I ended up just reading the first book, and I'm going to leave it there. I ended up giving this 3 stars. In this book, we see all of our favorite Clue characters as they are students at a private school called Blackwood Academy. This school is very secluded. It's very elite, and most of the students are gone home for vacation, but some of the students are still there when a huge storm rolls through and a storm surge cuts them off from the village. By morning, the headmaster is found murdered, and they have to find out who had a reason to kill Mr. Bobby. I liked all the nods to Clue. However, I did find the mystery fairly straightforward. There was not a moment where I didn't really know what was going on. It was very straightforward to me, and that was very unfortunate because I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more difficult to figure out who killed Mr. Bobby. But like I said, I did really like all the little Easter eggs to Clue and the game and the people and the characters and how we took these characters and kind of expanded on their likes and dislikes. So Colonel Mustard was like an exchange student from a military school. Plum was the top student in the science department. It really did fit the vibes for Clue. So it is November 6th, and yesterday I finished Cinder, which is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles. I am shocked I've never read this series. It has been on my shelf for a very long time. But for one reason or another, I haven't. I always say I love fairy tale retellings, so I'm kind of embarrassed I haven't picked this up, to be honest. But now I have. I ended up reading this for the ballroom prompt for Clue, which was to start a series. I needed to read Cinder this month anyway because I'm going to be reading Scarlet for a video that I have coming out this month. So I needed to start the series and read Cinder. I'm sure everyone knows what this is, but it is a sci-fi fairy tale retelling of Cinderella where we follow Lynn Cinder, who is a cyborg, and obviously it kind of follows the story of Cinderella. Cinder is the top mechanic on Earth, and the prince needs his android fixed. Takes it to Cinder, and obviously sparks fly. Also throughout this book, there is a pandemic going on. The world is in the middle of a plague, and people are dying very, very rapidly. The only people that have a cure are the Lunars, who are kind of this race that lives on or near the moon, but they will not give the cure to the people of Earth unless they do something that they very much do not want to do. I really did enjoy this. I felt it was a really good fairy tale retelling. It's a really good start to the series because they do connect. We did not have a conclusion in this book that like finishes the story. It goes through the entire series and each book kind of builds on each other. So I really did feel like this set it out really well, and I am excited to read Scarlet later in the month. I ended up giving this 4 stars. So it is November 13th, and I have 3 books to tell you about. Last week was not the best mental health week for me. So picking up the camera any more than I needed to just didn't really happen. So I'm just gonna update you on my reads. I also kind of only had mediocre or disappointing reads last week. I don't know if my mood was affecting my reads or vice versa. I don't really know, but it was a rough reading week. So let's dive in and I'll tell you what I read. First, I finished The Scarlet Fail by Shelley Mahurin. This is the first book in the series, but it does kind of spin off from the Serpent and Dove series. So if you want to read Serpent and Dove, I would read that first. This series definitely spoils the ending of Serpent and Dove. This is said to be a vampire romance, but realistically, the romance is not in this book. This is a very long prequel. It's not listed as a prequel, but that's what it is. It is setting up for everything that's going to happen in book 2, and nothing really super important happens in this book. It's setting up the players, setting up the world, setting up the characters, getting everybody where they need to be, but that's about it. So I would definitely say this romance is slow burn because it is getting set up in this, but it doesn't actually happen in this book. This follows Celie. She's the first female to be in this group of huntsmen, and she is definitely the only girl in the boys' club. They don't want her there. It's very much a patriarchy. She's fighting against it, and it's getting really old really fast. There is a set of murders going on. A lot of women are being found murdered, and they are keeping her out of the investigation. They're not telling her what's going on. When she finds out, she kind of like runs away. She's like, I'm done dealing with this. And she runs away. And when she runs away, she's kidnapped by McCall, who is a vampire. He takes her to his vampire land because he thinks she is going to be able to help him solve his own mystery. The mysteries are somewhat connected, and we do find out who the murderer of these people are by the end of the book, but that's about all we figure out. Like I said, it's very much setting up for what's happening in book 2. I will be continuing, but I only gave this 3 stars because it was just very much middle of the road and setting up for what I think is going to be a great second book. The next book I read was for Get a Clue Readathon for the kitchen prompt. I needed to read a book with food, so I read Diana Mont Davidson's Sticks and Scones. This is a cozy mystery series that I picked up in a little free library fairly recently. I did not love this series. I did not love our main character, and I would not actually say she was much of a sleuth. It was more of this caterer who was very suspicious of her husband and looking into what was going on in his life, as well as also being very suspicious of her ex-husband and looking into what was going on in his life and solving a crime while doing so. I ended up giving this 2 stars, and I did end up picking up 3 more books when I was in the little free library for this series. I do not think I will be continuing though. Last but not least was V.E. Schwab's Vicious. This I read for the study for Get a Clue Readathon. For this, I had to read a book with a school setting from an author that I read from before because I had given The Kitchen 2 stars. V. Schwab and I have an interesting past. Adult books by V.E. Schwab I haven't really loved, but I do love the middle grades that V.E. Schwab writes, so I was hoping that I would like this, and I really do think that the writing style just doesn't work for me except with the middle grade series, and I don't know why that works and it doesn't in YA and adult. I did have an okay time with this, but I only ended up giving it 3 stars. This follows college students Eli and Victor. Eli decides to do a thesis on extraordinaries, and they decide to see if they can make themselves into extraordinaries. It sends them off into a villain path kind of against each other, and we follow what happens. It was okay. It wasn't bad or anything. It was actually interesting a good amount of the time, but the writing style just doesn't work for me. And I'm so sad to say that because I know so many people love V.E. Schwab and I want to love it too, but it just doesn't work for me. So it is November 15th and I finished 2 books since I last talked with you. The first one was The Scarlet Princess. This is a book I got off KU for a vlog that's coming out. You'll have seen the vlog by the time you see this, so for a vlog. This is a bit of a fairy tale retelling. It kind of gives you the vibes of Merida from Brave, the Disney movie. Made me want to watch the movie. Definitely did that too. This follows Rowan. Rowan is the princess of the Lachlan's. She goes down with her cousin into these like caverns under the city to smuggle out vodka from a neighboring land. A storm comes. A cave-in happens and they get stuck. They get found out by this neighboring kingdom and find out that it is illegal to smuggle and the punishment is death.
Which seems like a bit of an overreaction, but here we go.
They take her captive, find out she's the princess. Obviously, they can't just go executing the princess of a neighboring land. So they decide to pack her up and take her to a clan kind of gathering where all the different leaders of all the different clans are going to vote on what to do with her. I really do love the Scottish vibes in this book. It's very, very Scottish, and I really do like that about this book. One of the people overseeing her is Theo. It's kind of his job to like keep her in line while they go to this gathering. There's an instant lustful connection between her and Theo. But then when we get to the gathering, there is a kind of a enemies to lovers situation with another gentleman. And at the point at the end of this book, I didn't really know which way she was going to go with which gentleman. If it's going to be a love triangle, I don't really know. But I'm excited to find out and continue into another book. This definitely reads more like a prequel, like setting up the story for the future books, but I'm here for it. I had a good time with it and I want to know more. Our main character is super strong. She's like, I can get it done myself. She's this strong female character and I want to know more about her story. The next book I read was Campus Player and we have another Rowan. However, that's our male protagonist in this book. This follows Demi and Rowan. Rowan is the star football quarterback at this college. He is a player. Everyone kind of has rumors to have been slept around by him, etc., etc. And Demi is the coach's daughter. She is also a star soccer player. And they've always had this attraction. However, Demi does not want to hook up with a football player. She does not want to hook up with a guy who's been sleeping around. She's not interested. Little does she know that all of that is just rumors that has been going around school, and he is not like that at all. And he's been holding a candle for Demi for years. I really had a great time with this romance. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think I got it for Stuff Your Kindle Day. The only thing I didn't love about it was the 3rd act breakup. The 3rd act breakup was a bit ridiculous. It was completely unnecessary how we did the 3rd act breakup, and I wouldn't have been okay with them coming back from it, except that I loved Rowan and Demi so much that I overlooked it. I had to overlook the ridiculousness of this man. But I really did like this. I've been in a little bit of a slump lately, so I think what I needed was just a college sports smutty romance to give me something that I would like to get me out of my slump. So today is November 17th, and yesterday I finished 5 books. It was the mid-month chaos for Clue, so we were just trying to read as many books as possible. I ended up getting 5 read, and since there's a whole vlog on these books and they're all quite small, I'm just gonna go through these very, very quickly. The first one I did was Betting on the House by Cassandra Metcalf. This was a book I got for Stuff Your Kindle Day. It said that it's a romance, and there is a sapphic romance in this book. I would not call this a romance. This follows Natalie as she comes home to her grandmother's house after the passing of her grandmother to settle her will. And it really is more following Natalie, kind of fixing the cracks in her family, coming to terms with past instances in her family that has happened. More of a family saga, kind of woman, kind of changing her life story versus a romance. There is honestly more like instances where she's with friends than she is ever with Bonnie, who is the romantic interest in this book. So I think calling it a romance is a stretch, but I did have a good time with it and gave it 4 stars. It was still a good story. I just wouldn't call it a romance. The next book I read was a manga, My Brother's Husband. This follows Mike. Mike is a Canadian who married a Japanese immigrant to Canada, and his husband has now died. He goes to Japan to see his husband's family, and we see a lot of discussion around gay marriage in Japan. It is illegal. We see his husband's family kind of coming to terms with the fact that their brother is gay. They weren't really accepting of their brother at the time, so we see them kind of coming to terms with it now that he's passed, which is so sad that they didn't accept him while he was still alive. I absolutely loved Kana. Kana is the little girl in this book. She is so innocent, so beautiful. Her outlook on life is so fantastic. And just the way she just accepts Mike into her family immediately and goes, he's my Uncle Mike. And just the love that she shows is just beautiful. The topics covered in this book are heavy, but they are done so well, and I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Frederick Bachman's Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. This is just a dad talking to his baby, his son, telling him things that he thinks he needs to know about the world. It's a funny look on parenting. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I love Frederick Bachman, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I did Rowans Island. This is a graphic novel that ended up in my little free library about a week ago, so it was perfect timing to pick this up. However, I did not love this. I gave it 2 stars. The story was really, really jumpy, and the writing style just didn't work for me. It was very confusing. First, they'd say they weren't going to do something, and then 1 page later, they were going to do it. So I just didn't love this. It just didn't work for me, but the art style was quite nice, so 2 stars, unfortunately. The last book I read was This Winter by Alice Osman. Can we go wrong with Nick and Charlie? I don't think so. I love being in the Heartstopper world. I'm always happy to be there. This follows Nick, Charlie, Tori, and Oliver over one Christmas after Charlie comes home from his stay at the hospital for an eating disorder. It was a great book. It was a short read. I can never go wrong with Nick and Charlie, and I gave it 4 stars. It is Monday, November 20th, and I finished 3 books on the weekend. I read a ton of alien romances this weekend and finished 3. The first one I finished was Saving Vero. This is the 3rd book in the Caucanian series. I'm reading this with a few other booktubers. This follows Vero following the events of the 3rd book. Vero is kind of captured and gets lost in the wilderness, and he stumbles upon the human Lily, who ran away in an earlier book. They have to get back to civilization, and while they're doing that, they find out that they are mates and there's a romance. That's really the main plot of this book. A little bit happens within the world as a whole, but that's the general idea. This was probably my least favorite in the series. We have a little bit of overlapping timelines happening in this book, and I understand that the characters need to go through that, but I already have seen certain things as a reader of the previous 2 books, and I don't really need to be going through them again, and I kind of wish we told that in a different way so it didn't feel so repetitive. The first 30% of this book was really, really repetitive, and for me, that just kind of lost focus. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and we'll see how the next one goes. The other 2 books I read with Leandra, the TBR 0 on sprints. We do Ice Planet Barbarian sprints every second month, and we read 2 books. We read Barbarians Hope, which is Asha's book, as well as Hemilo's book. This is our first alien romance, which was really interesting in Ice Planet Barbarians, and there was a little bit of a friendship storyline in this book with Asha and Claire. Really liked that, and if that would have continued through the whole book, I would have been very, very happy. Halfway through, we kind of changed what the plot was going to be and went in a different direction, and I didn't love that different direction. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was still pretty good, middle of the road Ice Planet Barbarians book for me, but if it would have stayed in the vein that it was in the first 50%, this might have been a 5-star read for me. I really liked the first half of this book. The other book we read was Barbarians Choice, which is book 11 in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. This is Farley and Marduk's book, another alien romance. I had some issues with this book, and it was mostly around the way our main male character and really all the other characters were focused on how innocent Farley was. And the power dynamics in this book really did not work for me. There were so many times he compared her to a child, and yes, she's 22, but she is a very immature 22. And just the stark contrast with the very kind of large age gap, he's 38, it just did not work for me. I felt uncomfortable through most of this book and probably would have DNF'd it if it wasn't for the the fact that there was some world building going on that I needed to know to continue on with the series. I ended up giving this 1 star. It's definitely not my favorite at all, but I do like this series as a whole, so Leandra and I will continue to be reading it. So today is November 21st, and yesterday I finished Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This is Ali Hazelwood's YA debut, and I would say calling this YA is a stretch. It's more a new adult novel than a YA. It's not explicit, but there's a lot of talk of, Tinder hookups and things of that nature, and I think YA is a little bit of a stretch. However, that does not mean I did not love this book, because I had a great time with this, and this is probably my favorite Ali Hazelwood book. This was so fun. I loved the character work in this book, and I was really invested in the story. This follows Mallory. Mallory grew up playing chess, but has quit chess and has for a few years. She's taking care of her family. Her father has died. Her mother has a chronic illness, and she's taking care of her family and her sisters. She works at a mechanic store. It's her job to kind of keep everybody afloat. Her friend signs her up for a charity chess tournament, and while she's there, she ends up playing the best player in the world, Noah, the King Killer, and she beats him. And it starts her into playing professional chess again. And obviously, a romance happens at some point in the book. I did really like this book. I think it's my favorite Ali Hazelwood. Gave it 4 stars. And I kind of hope that Ali Hazelwood writes more in this new adult genre. I think it worked really, really well. It is November 23rd, and I finished Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. Unfortunately, this was not as good for me as the first book. The first book, I gave 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. This one, I gave 3, so I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it. This book follows the outcome of the first book, and we kind of see Pip making a podcast about solving the case that is solved in the first book. And we see the various trials from the first book. And for me, I never really care about following the trials or the outcomes of a previous thriller. Pip does take on another case during the time, and we see her investigating that case. And I just felt it kind of inorganic. The first book, it made sense that this high school student was kind of looking into this cold case. That made sense. It was a school project looking into this cold case. The police were not investigating. That kind of made sense. In this book, I don't really understand why an 18-year-old would be the one investigating. I don't understand why the adults surrounding this 18-year-old would just be like, yeah, this is perfectly normal. Pip really felt very different, especially near the end of this book, due to things that happened. She's only 18. I just don't know if this sequel was necessary. Unfortunately, I know the third book is not loved by a lot of people, so I don't know if I'm going to even pick up the third book. I know people who liked the second book and didn't like the third book. What do you think? Should I read the third book? Let me know what you think in the comments, because truthfully, I'm kind of undecided. I'm kind of wondering if I should just think of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder as loving the first book and then kind of letting go of the rest of the series, but let me know what you think. So today is November 24th, and yesterday I finished Their Vicious Darling by Nikki St. Croix. This is the third book in the Never King series, which I started earlier this year. The first book, I read The Never King, and I absolutely adored this book. 5 stars, loved it. It's a retelling on Peter Pan. Peter Pan takes one of the Wendy Darling girls when they turn 18, brings them to Neverland. They do come home, but they never come home the same. Winnie, she's about to turn 18. She knows Peter Pan is coming, and she doesn't know why. Peter needs the Darling girls to help him find something he's lost, and he keeps coming to take them. When Winnie comes to Neverland, she actually finds out Peter Pan has a host of lost boys, but also has Vane, Cash, and Bash. And the 4 of them and Winnie have a reverse harem situation. So it is a smutty retelling of Peter Pan. Unfortunately, since the first book, the series has not quite been as good. The rest of the books, for me personally, I gave the second book 4 stars, and I gave this one 3. This was my least favorite in the series. I just don't know if the rest of the series has enough of that Peter Pan retelling vibe that I loved in the first book. And in this book, we knew something at the end of book 2 that took a very long time for everybody else to find out. And I don't necessarily love when that happens in a book. If I know about it, I want it to be kind of discovered fairly quickly, because then I just feel like what I'm reading is very repetitive or not really showing me anything new. And that's how I felt about this book. It was just kind of waiting for everybody to catch up to what I already knew. So it didn't feel like there was that much happening for me. It's still a 3-star book, so there is obviously some things I did like about it. It's certainly not a bad book. And I will continue with the series because there is only one book left, so I might as well finish. I will say the first book is definitely my favorite in the series. So today is November 26th, and last night was the Besties live risque read sprints where we read smutty holiday romances. Yes, it sounds as crazy as it is, or it is as crazy as it sounds. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about these long because neither of them were good, but it was a fun time. We had a good laugh. It was a good live stream. Like, we had a good time, but the books were not good. So the first book we read was Taken on Thanksgiving. This is a plus size romance. So I do want to mention that because I did enjoy the plus size rep in here. And to be honest, I have already blocked out the name of these characters. It has already left my person. So this follows our main female character who is invited to her neighbor's Thanksgiving dinner. When she arrives, her neighbor, who is Aunt Raph, for some reason that name has stuck in my mind. Well, there is a reason that name stuck in my mind, but we're not going to go into that. Anyway, she's invited by Aunt Raph to have Thanksgiving. When she arrives at the Thanksgiving dinner, Aunt Raph's nephew, who was just released from prison that day, is at the dinner. Our main male protagonist was Australian in the book, and it was written to a cringy degree. It was like what people think like stereotypical Australians talk like. And since I have so many Australian friends, I knew that wasn't really accurate, and it was just a little weird. Anyway, they have a smutty time in the kitchen while cooking a turkey. Yeah, that happens. And then the plot goes awry. It just goes crazy. There's some family drama. There's some running from the cops, and it just went nuts and made no sense. I ended up giving this 2 stars, and the smut was actually okay, but the plot was just nuts. And not in a good way. The second book that we read was Stuffed by the Were-Turkey. This was only 13 pages, thank goodness. I was hoping this was a shifter romance. It was, but it wasn't. So it is a turkey, and it is a smutty time around Thanksgiving, but our turkey shifts into a half man, half turkey hybrid. So he's man from the neck down and turkey from the neck up, and he can only gobble. And I think that's all you really need to know why this book got 1 star. But that's what it got. I've read them, so I had to let you know about them. I did them live with Rainey, Neva, and Kelsey, and I'm glad that I did them live with them because this was a good time because I read it with them, and not really a good time because the books were good. So I have finished another book. I have finished Legend Board by Tracy Dion. This book I picked up for Get a Clue. I picked this up for room 8, I think, which was the lounge. So I picked this up for that, and I kind of regret that choice. This book was very dense, and it was so intriguing, and I feel like the author did so much with the world and the magic system that was going on in here that me rushing it for a room book was kind of unfortunate. I would have liked to have really taken my time because I do feel like in the first half of this book, I missed some things because I was rushing. This follows Bree. Bree has just lost her mother. Her mother has died and she's gone off to college. She is a high school student, but she's doing like college courses at college. Her first weekend at college, she sees a group of students being attacked by a demon, and also the people who kind of like executed the demon getting rid of the demon. This takes her down a path of learning about a secret society, legend-born blood magic. She even finds out a little bit about her own history as we go throughout this book, and I really enjoyed this book. The ending really was something that I didn't see coming. Maybe I should have, but I didn't, and I really am excited to continue with this series. However, like I said, the first 100 pages, I was confused. I don't know if that was the book or if that was me. I'll be the first to admit it might have been me trying to rush this book. I found I was understanding what was going on if I had the book in front of me. If I was just listening to the audiobook while doing other things, I was lost. Like I said, I don't know if that's a me thing or a book thing, but it did detract from my enjoyment of the beginning of this book. But I will admit, that might have been me. When I read the sequel, I'm definitely going to take my time with it and actually just sit and read it, because I did that with the second half of this book. I had all day Sunday to just sit and read with the book in front of me, and I enjoyed this book much better once I could do that, and I felt like I was understanding it a lot better once I could do that. So I'm going to do that with the sequel. This book is a King Arthur retelling. It follows a wonderful magic system that actually weaves in systematic racism and Tracy Dion's kind of personal experiences into the magic system and how the magic system actually works. And that was really interesting and powerful to see an author pull on their life experiences and, unfortunately, the racism and systematic generational trauma that this author and a lot of people of color have experienced and put it right in the magic system. That was very, very interesting. I'm very excited to continue with this series, but like I said, I'm going to take my time with the second one. I think I needed a little bit more time. So I finished 2 more books I need to tell you about. The first one is Scarlet, which is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. This is the sequel to Cinder that I read earlier in the month, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because you just saw it not 10 minutes ago. But this is the sequel. I really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. What I liked about this is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and we follow Scarlet. Scarlet is a young teenage girl. Her grandmother has gone missing, and she knows something is not right. She starts looking for her grandmother, finds Wolf, who is an ex-gang member, and they both suspect that this is the gang that took her grandmother. So they start working together to find her grandmother, and that's kind of how it follows the Little Red Riding Hood story. What I really liked about this book was it does work together with the overall plot that kind of goes through all of the books in the Lunar Chronicles. And we do see Scarlet kind of meet up with the characters from the first book and work together closer to the end of this book, but we still see all of our characters throughout the book. But also, Scarlet has her own story, and we still have the Little Red Riding Hood retelling within the overall plot of the Lunar Chronicles. And I really did like that versus having it kind of as a side story. It really did still stand on its own, and then we see how it connects, how the pieces kind of connect together. I am definitely going to be continuing with the Lunar Chronicles. I'm having a great time with it. I don't think I'll get to another one this month, but 2 of these books in the same month, I'm very happy to have gotten to 2. The next book I read was my last book for Get a Clue Readathon. I'm sure I'll read a couple more books as additional prompts, but this is the last room prompt, and it is for the haul, and I read Not My Type by Evie Mitchell. This I think I got for Stuff Your Kindle Day. If I didn't, I don't know how it got on my Kindle, but that's what I think happened. And as you can see from this cover, this is a very cute looking romance book. And that's what I was expecting. I don't know why I did not realize what it was. And it is a cute romance, but it is a cute romance with BDSM and rope play. And I was not expecting that. Didn't deter me. Had a good time with the book, but I wasn't expecting it. I probably should have from the name of the book, but did not put that together. This follows Frankie, and Frankie is a sexologist who has a podcast that kind of helps people with accessibility issues work their way through sex and intimacy. She gets a question about rope play and BDSM, and she reaches out to Jay, who knows about these kind of things, and they start a romance. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, and it was just middle of the road for me. There was nothing that really worked for me, but nothing that didn't work. It was just a 3-star book for me. The one thing I did really like about this book, though, was the disability rep. I really liked to see kind of how we worked to make things accessible and how it was talked about in the book. I really did like that aspect. It's not something you see in romance books that often, and it was really nice to see that kind of going forward. And I think all of the books kind of follow that same vein. I do have the second book in the series, and I will be picking it up hopefully fairly soon. We'll see kind of which books work for me the best. I think this one, I just didn't really fall in love with the characters as much as I needed to for a romance to work super well for me. But I have high hopes that as we continue, we met some of Frankie's friends, and I'm assuming that the following books kind of follow her friends. And there's some friends that I would really like to know more about. It is December 1st, which means it's the end of the month. It's the end of the wrap up. But yesterday I did finish 2 books. The first one was Bound by Her Alien by Tempest Luna. I actually started this when I was reading the Ice Planet Barbarians books and ended up not finishing it that weekend and didn't really get back to it until yesterday. But but I was determined not to have it move into next month because next month I have my Goodreads clean out vlog and this did not need to go in it. So I was determined to get this done and I did. This is obviously an alien romance. It follows Tessa and her friends, although we don't see her friends in this first book much. They are on kind of a dystopian version of Earth. Earth is dying and they are sent off on a mission to harvest materials from other planets. They crash on this planet where the aliens of this planet are under the rule of the Supreme Ruler. The Supreme Ruler is a different alien race than the aliens of this planet, and he has been ruling this planet for quite some time. He's killed most of the males of this planet. The females of this planet have been captured, and it's a very violent planet. The Supreme Ruler does find Tessa, sees no use for her, and actually sells her at the market as like a slave. There is an underground faction that does not agree with what the Supreme Ruler is doing, and they make it possible that Tessa goes to someone who will take care of her and obviously not treat her that way, and that's Ro. Ro and Tessa obviously start a romance, and they decide that they are going to try to take back the planet. And we don't see that in this book. This book has a few different books in the series. So I think that's going to be the overarching plot of kind of like fighting against this Supreme Ruler. I ended up giving this 4 stars because I actually really did enjoy how it was written. And it definitely covers some hard topics. So definitely check out the trigger warnings. So it was an interesting way to kind of see how Tessa coped with this very different society. And I think it just kind of lined up in a more realistic way. Not realistic because obviously it's an alien romance, but you know what I mean. Sometimes I'm like, these girls, they end up on these planets and they're just like, okay, this was a bit different from that. The second book I finished was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the second book in the Bright Fall series, following the events of Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Astrid Parker is in the first book. She is Delilah's stepsister. And to be honest, I was very hesitant to pick up this book. I did not like Astrid in the first book. I really did not like Astrid. So to read a whole Astrid book was not something I was super excited to do. Luckily, Bree from Four Paws in a Books told me to read this book, put it in my roll-up recs, and I'm so glad that it was there because I probably would have skipped over it to read Iris Kelly and I would have lost my favorite book of the month and a 5-star read. This follows Astrid. She has been contracted to be the designer of the Everwood Hotel or Inn. So Natasha Rojas has come to town. She is kind of the host and designer of a TV home design show, and she's going to be following the renovation of this hotel. Jordan Everwood is the granddaughter of the owner of this hotel and is also the lead carpenter on this project. During this book, we are really following Astrid kind of finding herself after what happened in the first book. And we see Astrid really trying to decide what she wants her life to be. Has she just done things because she thought that's what she was supposed to do, because her family told her that's what she was supposed to do? Or is she doing what she actually wants to do with her life? And we see Astrid kind of going through this metamorphosis through this book. I loved Jordan. It made me love this book even more, but I really did like seeing Astrid's journey through this book. And it was 5 stars. 5 stars. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I can't say enough about this book, and it is my best book of the month. This is the first day of a new month. That means we need to go through my stats for last month, and I ended up reading 26 books, which resulted in 7,832 pages. My best book of the month was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. We ended on a high note. My last read of the month was my best read of the month. And my least favorite had to be the Were Turkey. I mean, I didn't expect this to be great, so this is not surprising. But that is the end of November, and I'm heading into December reads and hoping to end the year off on a high note. What was your favorite read of November? Let me know down in the comments down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.